Burlesque was all about satire and making fun of politics and society and really just shamelessly laying it all out there. And the women that performed the striptease acts were very liberated in taking their bodies back for themselves. Because at this time, women were wearing like shirts down to here, the big poofy thing with the turn of the century coiffed hair. So girls, showed their bodies. So this was a very liberating time for women kind of taking back and owning their sensuality and being told it's not a sin.
You're listening to Staring at the World with BoDeans, Kurt Newman, a T. Torrance Productions original podcast.
Hey everybody, I'm Kurt Newman. We are staring at the world today with a world-renowned burlesque star, which I really didn't know. I still don't know much about, so we're going to learn about it today.
Wonderful.
Our guest is an entrepreneur, a fashion designer, producer, famous for her dazzling burlesque performances, stunning productions, producer of the Glamour Ball, and the beauty of burlesque. Welcome to the show, Miss Tosh.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It's good to see you. My first question right off the bat, though, was that your name is Tosh. Where did that come from? Because I didn't read anything about it. I don't know where it came from.
Well, it's not as exciting as it might seem. My grandmother has always called me Miss Tosh. My name is Tosh. So to identify myself from the other Toshes out here, I am Miss Tosh.
Yeah, that's nice. So it's a family name.
It is a family name.
That's beautiful because my wife and me, we call our daughters nicknames too, which I won't say here because they'll get embarrassed. But we always have beautiful little names, then that's very personal. So it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And this show, my daughter asked me to interview her because she said your life is really all about creativity, which is very much my world as well. It's just always everything I do every day seems to have something to do with I approach from a creative mind. And it's not like a lot of people in this world. And so I wanted to have a podcast that kind of spoke to that and interviewed people who lived in that same kind of world and stuff. But I like to go all the way back with the guests to their childhood and just kind of like see where they started out and what their life was like when they were first, growing up and what influenced them and what their schooling was like and coming through all that. So it'd be great if you could go back in your history for us and the guests here and tell us about what you're going through, what your life was like early on and into school time and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, going way back, my great-great-grandmother was a vaudeville star in the turn of the century, so the late 1890s to the end of her career in 1920. And she actually performed in the theater that I have my show now, Beauty of Burlesque. So it's at the historic Globe Theater here in Los Angeles. And that family history was only brought to my awareness when my dad finally saw my show in 2018. So I've been hearing on this legacy and he goes, well, this is in our family. I'm like, wow, really? So it's been a legacy that I've been carrying on without the awareness of it and gotten to learn more about her. But my childhood, I grew up here in Los Angeles in Venice Beach, which, my neighbor was a chainsaw juggler and just like creativity was just, a part of the culture of my community and art and the street performers. And my dad made surfboards and my mom was a seamstress and a nail tech. So, they had practical applications for their art, which also was really inspiring. So learning how to make art a part of your everyday, but also make it a part of your living was something that was always around me. And my grandmother, my mom's mom, the one who calls me Miss Tosh, she was a ceramicist and a doll maker. So everybody was constantly making things. We were always crafting or designing the next Halloween costume,
Yeah.
That was very inspiring.
So, that's kind of the opposite of my childhood. Nobody was creative, everybody was like, get up, go to work, try to pay your bills, kind of blue collar stuff. And so when I had this creative mind and was getting lost in music and stuff, it didn't make any sense to anyone around me. But you're saying like in your life, it was just very much a natural thing. Like, of course, I would do something creative to make a living at, which is a lot of people don't
Not
really
very
think that way, you know?
Yeah, I'm
ahead.
very grateful.
Yeah, it's crazy. But for some people, it's nice when you have that kind of natural support there, that it makes logical sense for you to do that kind of stuff. But now I had read that you had gone to school somewhere up in Chicago, though. But are you saying you grew up in Venice Beach, California?
Yeah, so I through my childhood, I did have a bit of a rough childhood with my parents separating when I was young, and a big ugly court case that lasted until I was 15. I ended up taking actually both my parents to court to settle it and make it the way that I thought it should be.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of training for life there. And
Yeah.
but during that time, I loved dancing, and my mom being a single mom and my grandmother selling her house and moving into the small apartment, where, my mom, my sister, and we shared a room, and we were just very on top of each other, but loving and nurturing. And it was hard, but we always found a sense of like unity in our family.
Yeah.
And so my mom was like, this child loves dancing. What am I going to do? I can't pay for fancy dance classes. So she took me to audition at Debbie Allen's Dance Academy for the scholarship. And it was amazing and brutal and wonderful and strict. And we have a kitty here. And she was wonderful for doing that. And it brought a lot of structure to my life because I won the scholarship and I attended the academy and danced wonderful, like learned flamenco and ballet and hip hop and tribal dancing. And it was a whole education of dance from around the world. And it really just was something I really needed as an escape from my childhood and the drama of my family. And so when I was about 18, it was time, where you audition to become a ballerina in an academy. I'm going to bring my kitty outside for 1 minute.
Sure. And I'm going to have a sip of coffee, folks. It's brought to you by Yeti. And what's the coffee I drink? I don't even remember. It's Pete's Major Dick's coffee. Okay, back to the interview.
The kitty commercial break. And so I injured myself really terribly. I blew out my knee and dislocated my shoulder. And I was just like, wow, I'm 18. This is kind of the time to audition for dance companies. And if you don't get it, you kind of just miss out because you can only do that career for so long. And I was like, okay, well, I have this drawing portfolio, so I'm going to apply to art school. So I just started going to whatever college was visiting LA and bringing my portfolio in, and got rejected by most of them. But Chicago, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, the vice president was actually the woman I had my interview with, and she saw my drawing portfolio and she was interested about my story and my life. And she said, how about you come to Chicago and we'll give you a full ride? And I said, well, of course, if I'm wherever the scholarship is, I'm going.
Yeah.
So I went without really any idea of how cold it was going to be. So that was an experience. I ended up living there for 7 years. And it's really where I began performing burlesque as well. So it was a very organic and kind of a dive down Alice in Wonderland's rabbit hole for me.
Yeah. When you say that your parents are going through this big divorce and stuff like that, I got into music to kind of escape the world, I feel. It was a place where I could reside, where I felt I related to what was happening. Whereas in the everyday world of school, middle school, and everything that was going on, I just didn't feel like I was relating to it, and music was. So when you talk about your parents' divorce like that, I wonder if that was dancing and eventually, fashion in school and stuff like that. Did that kind of become your place to reside where you understood it, it understood you, it didn't ask anything of you except what you wanted to give and those types of feelings?
Exactly, exactly. And I think that's what's so special about art is it's just a very pure space that you're right. It doesn't ask you for anything other than just dedication, right?
Yeah.
And if you devote and dedicate yourself, the art will reward you, with amazing experience and outlet for expression, skills that will last you your lifetime. And I am so grateful for Debbie Allen and that academy, for my mom, putting me in those positions to audition. And even though, you're scared, and I'm really grateful for that, because without, dance and music and art, who knows what would have happened as outlets for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It was
people often say like lose yourself in this, but I always felt it was almost the opposite that was going on. It wasn't that you were losing yourself in it as much as you were kind of finding yourself, or your soul was sort of finding an energy, a connection to an energy that really, it's almost like you're discovering yourself, and what you want to do. My mom had said to me when I was a teenager, like, well, if you like music, go to electronic school because you can get a job then somewhere. And I was like, I looked at her and I said, Ma, if I can't play music, for my life, I'm going to die trying, because it's just, I had that strong of a feeling at a young age about it. And I'm sensing for you, and as much as you've been in it and stuff in your career now, that must have been just as strong of a feeling for you, right? Or just as strong of a connection.
I think a big part of succeeding in art is having the mentality that there's no other option.
Yeah, exactly. You don't.
But you have to believe it. It's not just you tell yourself this. It has to be, that this is what I do, and I've always been flexible in the way I express myself, whether it was dancing or making something with my hands or painting or drawing. I'm grateful for that as well, because I was able to try so many different disciplines, and whichever ones landed or have become the ones that bring me financial stability, there's still other outlets that I express myself in, just because it's what my soul needs, my heart needs, with painting and drawing and things like this still. But I think art is really, really underserved and underappreciated in education for kids. I think it's something that I remember turning a certain age. I think it must have been somewhere around like puberty or 13. And my dad's girlfriend was just like, well, you're going to have to stop making these costumes and dioramas. And, now you're in the real world when you're in high school. And that's just going to be, books and this. And I'm like, well, there's books and math and science are wonderful too. I enjoy these things as well. But I'm like, why do I have to also stop doing this? Why is this something that's really reserved just for like very, very young adolescents? Why we accept it then, but we don't encourage it throughout the rest of our lives? And it's such a beautiful, what I think is, universal language we all speak.
Right.
Art,
Exactly. And again, one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast, I wasn't looking to do a podcast, but when my daughter said you should do one, that's the subject I wanted to talk about, was the lack of emphasis on art while you're growing up, and the lack of emphasis on creativity I found stunning, because to me, it was at the core of every single thing people do, whether you're putting a schedule together for your day or you're in a grocery store or something like that. It still seems to me it's based on creativity, even if it's not doing a painting or writing a song or something like that. You're still always using that, and yet they don't seem to foster it in school. They kind of try to damp it down more and more. And I was just always shocked by it as a kid, and that's, again, why I think I found myself going to the music room and just staying in there as long as I could, instead of hanging out in the lunchroom with everybody else, because it was a place that made sense to me about creativity's being fostered here, and it felt like that's what I needed to be doing. And again, it's so great having people like you here to say, yeah, you were going through that very same thing. I want to ask you, you went to art school, like, was the burlesque idea before you're making outfits and fashion, or was the fashion kind of before the burlesque, or did it all kind of come together?
Yeah. I never intended to go to school for fashion design. I had no intention. I mean, I always loved dressing up, and I always loved making my own clothes. And it's because my mom couldn't afford to buy me clothes, so she made me clothes, taught me how to sew, and then I got this whole like, well, no one has what I'm wearing at school, and even though other kids didn't find what I was wearing like cool or valuable, I had a lot of the same experience with not being accepted and spending most of my lunches in the art school room with my teacher, Miss Curran, who she also really encouraged me to focus on my art. And or once I had a car, I think I just would leave. Leave at lunch and just like drive around and look at the trees and just, and draw. And so when I went to school as a painter, I'm like, I don't know how or what I'm going to do, but this is some time that I get to have, we're very lucky to have with this scholarship, and really, learn the most I can about art, And so even in a creative college surrounded by artists, I was still kind of the black sheep because I didn't dress like a painting student, whatever that means, right? So I would come, with my hair like this and these little head wraps that I made, and I'd be drawing, and people would still make fun of me for, or they'd assume that I wasn't, a serious artist because I was wearing a pink bow on my head. Right. Like, wow, this, what I'm wearing is leaving a really strong impression. Like, I'm sending a message with what I'm wearing. And that was when it clicked. And I was like, fashion is a language, and people assume things about me based on the way I dress myself, and the symbolism, whatever a pink bow means to people, right, is sending this message. And I was like, okay. And so I started experimenting with the things that I wore in school as like a social experiment to see how people would respond to clothing and what I'd wear. And I was like, this is a language we all subconsciously respond to, speak to, a uniform versus this color or this shape. And so a teacher of mine was like, I'm noticing what you're doing. You should apply for the fashion department. And I'm like, I don't know if I really want to give my whole life to that, which is ironic because this is my whole life now. And she's like, just do it. And at the time, Nick Cave, he's an artist that creates these beautiful like wearable sculptures called sound suits, was the chair of the department. So, I come in with my current portfolio of paintings and things, and dressed how I dress, and told them about my dance history. And they were like, you're a very unusual person. Usually people come to the fashion department like knowing this is what they want to do. And I said, I'm still not sure, but I feel like a lot of things I have interest for are finding home in like speaking to Nick Cave. And I'm like, you were an Alvin Ailey dancer, so there must be a connection here with fashion and dance and color and painting, and my very intro level knowledge of sewing. And so I got into the department, and there were 10 students and in the world that apply for this. So then I was like, well, okay, if I'm in this now, I must live up to this department and the opportunity they're giving me, because there's so many people that want to be here, and I'm in this. So I'm like, okay, I got to give this my all. And I think my rigorous dance training prepared me for the rigor of this department, which was like so intense. It was, sleepless nights, like hallucinating, patterning.
Yeah. Right.
It was insane.
I still do that. I still have dreams that are somewhere enmeshed with studio, being in the studio and putting music together with my everyday life, and it mixes in such a strange way in your dreams.
It's right. It's very unusual, and I just dove in and then learned a new skill, which I was so excited for, because I mean, like, if I'm in school, I want to learn new skills. So something I didn't know before was pattern drafting, and I went into this world of creating patterns and geometry. Then all of a sudden had this creative voice to it.
Yeah.
That a circle, when it's laid out flat, turns into this beautiful thing when you drape it this way. It just it opened my mind and blew my mind. And I just was like, wow, you know, maybe I want to go and be an embroiderer for like Givenchy, you know, in the little white coat. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to go do. And my teachers were all these amazing artists that worked, you know, for McQueen and Givenchy and Philip Tracy. And I was learning to make hats and corsets and all this history. And I just found like music, that this was a part of human history, like the making of a thread and the making of a needle. Like, these things were such original inventions of humankind. Same with music, that I was like, wow, I get to be a part of carrying on this story of humanity. It just became like, yes, this is what I want to do, you know.
It's brilliant. Yeah, it's brilliant and really beautiful. I think learning that kind of stuff too, it's like, I see it as tools, and when you have tools, you can use those tools to put other things together that you wouldn't normally think of right out of the box. But that's the beauty of learning a skill, is you have a new tool and you can apply it to all these different places and create stuff. I want to ask you though, when I looked, my daughter sent me pictures of some of your burlesque performances, and the first thing I'm thinking of is sexualized and they're sexy and stuff like that. And burlesque, I believe, is supposed to kind of entice that, but maybe I'm wrong, so educate me on it. But do you find that you're really good with that, or do you have trouble with that, being sexualized or any of that? I mean, where does that all fall in with you?
I think the thing that drew me to burlesque first was I saw a video of Josephine Baker that Debbie Allen showed me when I was a kid. And it was my first time seeing a topless dancer, right? Because Josephine was in France performing topless with her banana skirt and all these beautiful feathers. And I was just like, wow, her energy and the beauty of her form and, you know, her energy. And I always found like sensuality and be something that is powerful and innate in all of us. You know, we have, you know, sex is a part of humanity, a part of nature, but it's so vilified for so many reasons, right? And it's used against people in a very horrible, toxic way. So it in an abusive way. So it takes away the beauty of it. So historically, burlesque theater was it's actually one of the few forms of theater that is originally American, that doesn't come from Greece or, you know, these kinds of things. So it's vaudeville comedy. You think about like the Straight Man and the Comedian, you know, or Three Stooges, or, you know, and then Disney took that, Timon and Pumbaa. You know, this is burlesque vaudeville comedy. And the stripper was a character featured performer within the broader scope of a burlesque show. And again, with chorus girls and dancers. But the thing that was unique about burlesque is that it was kind of the cheap show, or the blue collar worker show that they could afford to go see instead of the fancy Broadway show, right? And burlesque was all about satire and making fun of politics and society, and really just shamelessly laying it all out there. And the women that performed the striptease acts were, you know, very liberated in taking their bodies back for themselves. Because at this time, you know, women were wearing like shirts down to here, the big poofy thing with the turn of the century coiffed hair. So girls, you know, made their hair short and showed their bodies. So this was a very liberating time for women kind of taking back and owning their sensuality and being told it's not a sin, you know what I mean? Or it's a sin, but I don't care, I'm doing it anyways. Yeah. And because it's mine. And so it's interesting how that, 100 years later is still the same kind of narrative.
Yeah.
But burlesque through history was marketed as a show for men, right? A male audience. And I think the difference now with contemporary burlesque or the Burlesque Revival is that it's about women performing for women, women owning their bodies, owning the narrative, that same kind of story, but along with the satire and rebellious messages we're trying to share today with our own bodies, like, who says my shape isn't worthy? Here it is on this stage. I'm going to put jewels all over me. I'm just going to be out there in your face and show the audience that I own it and love it. And so this has now become kind of a movement that has inspired a massive resurgence of burlesque and an audience that's majority female.
Yeah.
Amongst all burlesque shows, because women are enjoying seeing other women owning their sensuality.
Yeah. And, my opinion, for one, I was been in an industry all my life that is very sexual as well. As a performer, it's very much part of rock music and stuff to have, that animal charisma or whatever it is in the business. So I very much understand it. But my feeling about what you're doing is like women are sexualized anyways, no matter where they are, what they're doing, how they're dressed. It seems very much that a woman in burlesque is taking back power of the situation, that she's more in control of the situation and she's putting on a show with it, which I think is great entertainment. And I'd love to see one of your shows too,
You are more than welcome anytime. And
you're saying
always,
that your shows are a lot more for women, so I'm guessing it's a bigger part of the LGBTQ kind of movement, which I know you've had a lot to do with in your life and your career and everything you do. So I just wanted to ask you, like, how do you feel the whole state of, as you say, there's a big resurgence in the burlesque movement? Do you feel like things are getting better or worse in that direction?
Well, I feel like it's like a teeter-totter, right?
Yeah.
In some ways we grow and get better, while other things are kind of ignored and not, there's still a lot of work to be done for LGBTQ rights and women's rights. And I do think, though, that the work that artists are doing is contributing to society becoming more tolerant. I don't know if society's fully accepting, but I think more tolerant and accepting that, LGBTQ talent and artists exist, and we are here, and we are on your TVs, we are on your radio, we're not a minority group that's erased, which I think had been the effort of society for so long. So I think the current entertainment and artists are really pushing for our presence to be known. And I think that, but is acceptance fully there? No, but I think that with my show, I've provided a safe space for people to express themselves, whether they're on stage or in the audience. Right. But I'm also making my show equal to that of like a pop review. Like I'm trying to elevate the stage and make it equal to what has, been a privilege for a lot of heterosexual society. Like that you can have a cast of majority people on stage and it be equal to the extravagance and tech and quality of what we've seen for so many years already, and that we're not just secluded to our gay bars, but that we can be on a gorgeous, beautiful stage and worthy of that. So I've really invested and risked a lot of my personal finances for this, and I'm so grateful that it has been able to continue and that the audience is here to celebrate this
Yeah.
message, you know.
I wish, like what we were talking about earlier about the clickiness of whether you're in high school or in art school or whatever, it's like I've always kind of felt I wish we didn't have to put everybody in categories, whether it
I
was
agree.
race or you're sexualized. Whatever it is, I just hate the idea that we have to be so cliquey about it. We can't just like support people doing what they love to do. With my music, when I come out and do shows, what I talk about to the audience halfway through is that, does anybody notice that there's no divisiveness here? There's no far right and far left here. We're all in a room singing together and we're all united in this energy that's happening. And it's like, wouldn't it be great if we could walk out of this room and still feel that? Why does music have the ability to do that? And I'm sure your shows have the ability to do that as well. It's like, wouldn't it be great if we could walk out of here and somehow feel united, that if we can sing a song together, shouldn't we be able to function in the world together without hating and pulling each other apart?
Yeah, I agree. I think moments when art is experienced, whether, being an artist on stage and experience it, but mostly when if I do go to a concert and I'm in the audience and observing the people, you think stadiums filled with people, that there's no way everybody in that room could possibly agree on many matters, but they're all together celebrating the message and the song they're hearing, right? Or dancing and joyous. And it shows that art kind of carries a universal love, a universal connectedness, especially within music. I think that we all can receive the same message and celebrate it together, and it's beautiful. But I just think we really get at each other, and there's very little tolerance, which I think needs to happen before even reaching a level of acceptance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because acceptance of one another and true empathy would be the ideal goal, but at the very least, just tolerating each other's differences with little to no harm to one another would be ideal. But
yeah, and again, if art was promoted more from the time you're in school to out of school, and creativity had some value, we keep devaluing it in our society with what we've done to music and art almost across the board. It would be, I think, if it was more valued and more everybody was kind of participating in it, there probably would be a lot more understanding of each other and coming together.
Absolutely.
Because art just seems to have that energy, whether it's visual or sonic or whatever energy is happening. It seems to have an energy that helps us come together more instead of divide up. Here's another subject. I've heard you've been, or you have worked as kind of a creative director on TV and film and stuff like that as well. Is that true?
Yeah.
What have you done there?
So while I was in school, I did a lot of sculpture and welding, and I just try to learn as many skills as possible. And I always had a dream and fantasy to be involved in stop motion. I love animation. I think it also goes with my obsession with the eras that, the aesthetic of like a Tex Avery, Red Hot Riding Hood with the wolf with his eyes, like all these things I just find to be so charming, and like the color and the lines and the way things moved, they're just very like yummy and delicious to me. So I, became obsessed with these things, and my grandfather, as a hobby, was a replica cell animator for Disney, and so kind of one of their independent artists that would draw cells to be sold. So when he passed, I actually lived at my dad's house in his art studio, so I was surrounded by a lot of this kind of work. So it became another obsession of mine. Just fascinated. So when I left Chicago, I was performing burlesque in a lot of the gay bars and nightclubs there, alongside a lot of the drag queens, not necessarily within the burlesque community, but more within the drag community. And that was kind of my, school by day, drag show by night. And I came back to LA, and I was just like, okay, well, I had this routine and this life, and I was a big fish in a really small pond in Illinois. And so I'm like, what am I going to do while I'm here? And I got very, very lucky to become a PA on a Target commercial. And it was for The Secret Life of Pets. And so I met a lot of people, and then through doing these coffee runs and talking to people and getting to know people, I eventually was asked, like, oh, hey, like, I've seen your drawings or your weird stuff you do over here, what are you doing? And like, oh, this is the thing I feel like I have to do all the time, so I compulsively do it. So I find myself working in stop motion. I'm building miniatures and doing scenic for commercial projects like Honda Days, all their little snow scenes. I did those, and like it was amazing to see this world of stop motion open up for commercials. Like everybody at Christmas wanted kind of the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer stop motion aesthetic within their projects. So I was excited because that was my first stop motion I ever saw. So I was like, oh my God, I get to make these little reindeers. And so I eventually was able to get a studio downtown with my partner at the time. And I made amazing, eccentric, weird things. I became the girl that people called and was like, I've got a strange request. Can you make me David Hasselhoff bust out of Gouda cheese? And I'm like, I sure can. And I did it. It's not like I've ever practiced that, but all the skills I had lent to these things. And my biggest project, commercial project I did was I got to do the night, I think it was 2018 or 2019 Apple commercial, their holiday commercial. And it was a team of me and 40 women who built everything in this commercial. And it looks so real. I think everybody thinks it's CGI, but it's actually all real practical things, like a little snow, a little ice. So this was just wonderful. And so I worked for, Leica Studios, who's like the kingpin of stop motion. So I got to have this experience. And then again, I was like, this is what I'm going to do, right? And I'm happy doing it. But my burlesque career always kept pulling itself to the forefront of people wanted me for this show. People wanted me for, and I was just like, how exciting. I must take these opportunities while they show up, because one day they won't, you know what I mean? So let's just have fun and go to Canada or go to Japan. How cool. Like, yes, I'm going to do this.
And what I'm hearing you say too, even a little bit, is what I've talked to some of my other guests, is that what you said with the Gouda and everything was you tend to jump right in. Even, like a lot of the guests I talked to, they weren't totally certain of what they were doing moving forward, but they said yes to it and jumped right in. And I like hearing that on this podcast a lot for everybody listening, that that's a good way to go. Things don't always turn out perfect, but it's a good way to move forward. And I think that's what you're saying in a lot of this. Is you didn't understand all of it, but you knew you had the skills there somewhere to get it as you went along.
And it's like a puzzle or a creative problem solving, right? And it was and it still is very exciting to be the girl that people contact for the eccentric creative problem solving things. And usually when I'm called in, it's usually a high stress panic. This needs to be done in 5 days because no one could figure it out. And then I, meet these people. I'm like, next time just call me in advance.
Yeah.
But it's always like, give me maybe a little more than a couple of weeks, right? But I still do these projects, and there's one I've currently worked on that's very exciting, but I don't think I can talk about it right now. But it's just very fun to be called in to save the day with eccentric things.
Yeah. But you're still doing the burlesque show, and like you said, it's at the Globe in LA. right?
Yes.
And I understand you were saying your grandmother was the vaudeville star there as well.
My great great grandmother.
Great.
So
And
great great.
you have a show coming up there kind of honoring her, is that right?
Yeah. So this is our 4th year anniversary. It's on. Usually our anniversary is Valentine's Day, but considering it's a Monday, we are now having it on Thursday and Friday. So it's the 17th and 18th of February. It's Beauty of Burlesque, and the tickets are at beautyofburlesque.com. And this show is very special because it's actually 100 years exactly since my great great grandmother had her farewell show at the Globe Theater, and her show was on Valentine's Day. So it's very exciting to have 100 years of her legacy continued.
It is. Did you
theater.
hear many stories growing up about your great great grandmother? I mean, doing burlesque in that age must have been pretty intense, you know?
I mean, well, that was kind of like the heyday for it, right? And I think people forget that the turn of the century was a very like sexually charged, rebellious, shift for society. And I think that's why prohibition happened. They were like, these people need to calm down, you know? and it's unfortunate because we don't have any video, or, you know, we don't have pictures of color to see all the extravagance. I mean, I've seen wigs from the 20s that were like neon pink, and these, like, you know, we see these pictures of these little waved hair, and we had them at school and they were like pink and gold. And I was just like, wait, that is not what I expected. Or seeing just, you know, they would have these secret parties where, you know, there's a lot of drag kings and drag queens and gay couples, and people would just go into the night and celebrate with one another. Very, you know, our fantasy of what the Great Gatsby movie kind of creates. But it was a time where people were like, you know, I'm not going to be married at 15 to trade some sort of thing with his family, and be this kind of no makeup, dress modestly, while my husband has his lover who is a lady who can wear lipstick and party. You know, it was this women that were like, you know what, I don't like this dynamic. I want to work. I want to wear pants. I'm going to put lipstick on. I'm going to pop on this wig and cut my hair off and dance on tabletops. I'm going to bind my chest so I look like a boy, you know, and the very flat flapper look. It was a very, very rebellious era. So she was, you know, very celebrated, and I just think that it was a time, it was like the time for it, which I think is so interesting. 100 years later, it has such a strong revival. It's almost like a little bit we're reliving that time period, but with all our tech and future, you know. There's a lot of parallels, a lot of differences, but there are some parallels with the need to rebel and go out. And you think the flu that happened at that time too, when everybody was isolated, it's similar. The need to reconnect and socialize and party and make art and music. It was it's very interesting. So to have 100 years later, Beauty of Burlesque at the theater that she had her farewell show at in 1922, and now it's 2022, is pretty cool.
That's amazing. My wife wanted me to mention that you'll be honoring Amy Harwick, or Dr. Amy Harwick, at the shows as well. Did you want to mention that?
Yeah, Amy was a friend of mine, and tragically was murdered after our 2019 Valentine's Day show that she attended. So we haven't been able to have a Valentine's Day show since Amy's passing. So this show will be truly the anniversary show after her passing. So we'll be honoring her and speaking about her at the show. And what was really important is that, to me, is that she did not know what was going to happen that night. She was having so much fun and had such a beautiful time with her friends. And I spoke to her after the show, and it was such a beautiful night for her and her friends to celebrate their platonic love for one another, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought that that was such a special representation of what Valentine's Day could mean, that it doesn't just have to be about romantic love.
Yeah.
And I think the message, even within her death too, shows that love can be very dangerous, and obsession can be very dangerous.
Obsession, right.
To the point, you know, and that we can find love in many ways, and it doesn't have to just be exclusive to a relationship. And I'm glad that she got to experience that.
Yeah. Focus on the positivity out there. That's what my message is focus on the positive. You know it, you can feel it. It's always there. Well, I want to thank you for joining us on my podcast and talking about this creative lives we live. Once again, Beauty of Burlesque at the Globe Theater, February 17 and 18. My wife and I will come out to a show, and we're out there on the coast one of these times, and
just
check it out.
Let me know, and we're ready for you.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Anything exciting coming up that you want to talk about? That's just the same, all your work with stop motion and burlesque and everything else?
Well, there's this exciting project coming out soon, but I don't think I have permission to speak about it yet. But maybe next time we chat, I can talk about that. But you know, I do have a clothing line that I'm wearing. You know, MissTosh.com, and it's by my namesake, and it's clothing for women from extra small to 4X. It's a wide range of sizes and styles, and things that are glamorous and comfortable, and it's a project I'm really proud of. And we always are releasing new items and things, and we always have a pop-up at the show so people can try things on in person, which is really fun. And then we have another project coming forward, which I haven't announced yet, but we can give a little sneak peek to it. I'm creating an event called the Glamour Ball, which will be less of a show and more of a happening where people can come and share creative ideas and their work in association with glamour and the idea of creating fantasy. So it'll be almost like a marketplace meets a creative workshop space. So that's coming this year, which will be really exciting.
That sounds great. Well, thank you once again for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you. And
I'm so glad to finally meet you. It's really a pleasure.
Virtually,
truly.
Yeah.
I know, virtually. We'll get in person, though.
Well, thank you again. We'll see you real soon.
Thank
Good luck
you.
with everything you're working on. And ladies and gentlemen, Miss Tosh.
Thank you, everybody.
So there you go. That's an interview with Miss Tosh, another very creative person spending her life doing creative things, trying to put some positive energy out there. Really enjoyed talking to her. Once again, subscribe, write review, download the podcast wherever you can get them. I'm Kurt Newman, and we're staring at the world.
Thanks for listening to Staring at the World with BoDeans, Kurt Newman, a podcast about creative innovation. Please be sure to download, subscribe, rate, and review, and keep listening wherever you get your podcasts.